All right, there we go. All right. Hey, everybody. Welcome to the all-new B2B Hour on AutoConversion. This is our new monthly webcast series that we are facilitating here for B2B marketing and sales professionals, business owners, entrepreneurs, you name it. Today is Wednesday, May 19th. I am Ryan Girardi, and thank you for joining us. So our general theme for the show, just in general, is how to stay connected and engage with customers, strategic partners, and employees. We have a unique product here on AutoConversion to help you do this as a B2B marketing professional, whatever your industry or your trade is. If it's business to business, we have a unique way to provide that for you. And you're kind of experiencing it right now by tuning in and participating. So we invite you here to learn, to network, and to grow your personal brand, your professional brand, grow that network, grow that online reputation. That's what we invite you to do. Now, today on the program, our specific focus is on omni-channel multimedia public relations for your personal brand and your business. And what does that mean? That's the question. What does that really mean? Well, you probably, when you check your social media feeds, you almost guaranteed to see people that you know and do business with that are posting videos of themselves or with other people, talking about a variety of things, how to do things better, how to do things the way they do them, maybe how to have a better life work experience. And obviously the creativity, the aesthetics to all this can vary from video to video. A lot of people like to make memes of themselves and put the memes out there to offer some sort of life hack or tip or inspiration. But do you ever ask what drives people to do this? To be what I would call a content producer? What's their motivation? How does publishing this information benefit them and benefit their business? And I think more importantly, how do they justify the ROI of that? So that's the general theme for today's program, is what's in an omni-channel multimedia public relations strategy. We're going to start the show. I'm going to have a conversation with Jennifer Ayres from Concinity. She is the host and producer of her new podcast, Survive and Thrive. And then after that, I have Sheri Traxler coming on from Vireo Life. This is Global Employee Health and Fitness Month. And so Sheri's agreed to come on and take on a short segment. We have about a 10-minute segment for health and wellness. Will be focused on that. And then in the second half of the show, I have Lance Kanab and Jeremiah Fox coming back, if you recall from our first episode together of the B2B Hour back in March. And so the five of us will be up here to have a panel discussion around your omni-channel multimedia strategy. So all that coming up. Stay tuned. We will be right back. And here we are, and there is Jennifer Ayres. What is going on? Welcome to the show.
Thank you, Ryan. Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it.
Yes, there's quite a process in the works to get here, but we made it.
We made it. Right, we did. That's right.
And I'm glad you got to experience the process and be here, because it's kind of like I think a lot of us look at the live event as the pinnacle of the process, but as people learn, at least working with me, that this is it's really the middle of the road. And that's the focus of today is how to take, conversations and content like this and put it into motion for your business. And you obviously see the benefit of doing that because you launched your first podcast, Survive and Thrive, in January, right?
That's right. That is right.
Well, we have a few minutes to talk about that. And what I'd love to really start with is what was the inspiration behind it? And what I can add is that I have spent months and sometimes a year or two working on a media concept before I, actually brought it into motion. So could you bring us maybe back to the start of when you started, putting this concept together of the podcast? What led to that?
Sure. Thanks. And thanks again for having me. This is a wonderful opportunity to be with you and to talking about this subject, which I knew very little about a couple of years ago. So the concept for Survive and Thrive really I would say also started about a year ago, maybe a little bit longer. I started my business, Kincinity, a couple of years ago, and a little bit longer than a couple of years ago now. And I started to just try to figure out early on as a business owner, what are the ways that I need to create a brand presence out there? I had come from very large consulting organizations. I was with Accenture first. Obviously, they have a powerful marketing program in their organization. And then I went to a smaller consulting company, North Highland. But so when I stepped out on my own, I was really not sure about what's the best way to help people understand what we do and what I can do and what our company can do beyond my immediate relationships. And I started to explore and do research and started to see some trends really that were happening in the industry, especially around the uptick of audio and voice. And when the pandemic hit, it was becoming even more, I think, abundantly clear that there were other channels that we could access to reach an audience. And so I started to explore the notion of doing a podcast. I've been listening to podcasts for years. I thought, well, why not? It'd be kind of fun. And so the idea behind Survive and Thrive is really a building upon my personal experience and the experience of my partners at Kincinity, where we've all been inside helping organizations either as part of that organization or consulting for that organization, and have seen leaders really struggle and organizations struggle with moving through transformative change. And we use that word transformative a lot, and sometimes I think it's overused because it can be very intimidating. But really, this is about in going through change. It can be difficult, but it also can be extremely rewarding. And we're focused on how do we help companies and organizations not just survive and get through that moment of change that can be very difficult and challenging at first, but to use that as an opportunity to thrive. So after a year, I finally put the idea down in paper, so to speak. Well, actually, I started to put it down on paper before then, but I actually was able to launch it with the help of Queued Up Podcasting, because one of my challenges was that I was not extremely technical, and trying to figure this out on my own was an amazingly painful experience in the beginning. So,
do you think you could launch a podcast on your own now, from a technical standpoint? Have you crossed that learning curve barrier?
So there are things that I now know how to do on my own, thanks to the support of the Queued Up Podcasting team that has helped me learn. But I find getting a little support and help from a friend is extremely beneficial for my business, because what I do best is not all of the stuff that needs to happen from a production standpoint. And I guess that's a lesson I learned early on. If you're talking about lessons, when I tried to do the podcast all on my own, it was taking a tremendous amount of time and energy. And I wanted to do it on my own because as a new business owner, I thought, well, I want to be sensitive to where my spend is, and I can probably figure this out. But what I was finding out very quickly is the effort it would take for me to actually get a podcast recorded and launched was taking away from what I do best, which is getting out, getting in front of people, working with my clients, bringing ideas to their business that help them with transformative change. So I don't know if I would do all of the work myself going forward.
It can be a lot of work. And the reason I ask that is most people would agree that the technical aspects of launching a podcast specifically isn't that great of a hurdle. If it's completely unfamiliar to a person, yeah, you have to learn some things. You have to go through a little bit of pain, but generally speaking, I don't think the technology is what's the challenge is. I think the real challenge is the content and how you're gonna create that content, and then, like all content, it's the amount of time that really goes into it. So just to I guess summarize what you explained, it was about a year from concept to execution for you. About a year. Now, how long have you had the business, Kincinity? When did you started the business? A few years prior, right?
Yes, we officially launched at the very tail end of 2018. So we got started in earnest, I would say, in 19, and then came upon a pandemic in 20. So,
okay. So about a year after,
yes.
about a year.
Yes.
What, other than the podcast, what were you doing before the podcast to, to accomplish the same thing, to get content out there, to network with people? What were you doing prior?
A lot of what I was doing was primarily trying to author articles and do some blog posts. And I found that, and following up with others through other social channels and reading and reaching out to people and doing a tremendous amount of work on LinkedIn to just read about people, read about what they're saying, reach out to them. But it's hard to do that as one individual and try to reach a very broad audience on a consistent basis. So I thought the podcast was a fun way for me to explore something that I could commit to on a regular basis, to curate content, to nurture relationships, to get a message out there, to help others get their message out there, and to just create a dialogue with an audience that maybe I haven't even had a chance to meet yet.
When I feel like I just had a small brain fart because you were talking about, I know what I was going to ask you. Sorry. Is it fair to say that you chose to go the podcast direction because you also listened to podcasts and you saw the value in it from being a podcast consumer?
Yeah, I think that's fair. I also find it personally easier for me to consume more information via audio, just given our busy schedules. It's so easy to just take a walk and pop in your headphones and listen to a podcast versus sitting down and reading an article. So for me, it's a faster way to consume a greater amount of information. And I suspect that might be true for a number of other of us out there that are busy executives or business owners, etc.
Yeah, I would say that. So, because a lot of times when I talk to people and maybe bring them, hey, have you thought about a podcast? If their reaction is no, not really, typically it's because they don't consume podcasts. And I don't have the numbers in front of me, but the growth and acceptance of podcast consumption is like still relatively low compared to what people consume. So if you think of from a business standpoint, blogs and videos like YouTube, so you have blogs, videos, magazines, articles, and stuff like that. Podcasting is the lowest. And I think last time I looked, I would say it was maybe around upwards to 20 to 25% of business people were consuming podcasts. So that tells you there's a lot of audience to be garnered still. And that's going to lead to the theme of today, which is an omni-channel, because as great as a podcast strategy is, it is only a single channel.
Right.
The other thing I want to get into, we have about, actually we only have 5 more minutes.
Okay.
And then folks, I'm talking here with Jennifer Ayres from Concinity, and she launched her podcast last year, Survive and Thrive. And she's just concluding season 1. So we're talking about the development of that. And in about 5 minutes, I'm going to bring Sheri Traxler on, and we're going to talk about Global Employee Health and Fitness Month. That's this month. And then at the bottom of the hour, we're going to bring on Lance Kanab and Jeremiah Fox as well. Jennifer will be back with us, and we'll be have a panel discussion on this very subject. So for the last couple of minutes, because I do want to get into ROI, but real briefly on execution, you said you partnered with a company called Queued Up, correct? Is that something you found online, or did someone refer them to you?
I found online doing research.
Okay. Did you research other similar companies?
I did. I interviewed probably about 5 different folks that were podcast support
provided
people.
That service.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. What made you decide to go with Queued Up?
I found that John, who I worked with, was extremely approachable and was able to flex to meet my needs as a new person exploring this space and a new business, a relatively new business. So he was willing to help teach me, which I was interested in. I wanted to learn how to do it too. And he was able to flex and provide a lot of support that, I just thought was.
So was that So then it sounds like what you're saying is it was the trust factor, right?
Yes, very much. Very much.
You felt you had synergy with John, and you could trust that in your hands. Great.
Yep.
From the time you decided to go that direction with Queued Up, how long before you got the first episode out to market?
It took me a little bit longer. I would say probably about 4 to 6 months. And the reason for that is I wanted to get a plan in place. For season 1, we focused on how COVID-19 was creating an imperative for change and what leaders and organizations were doing to respond to that change. So I wanted to get that plan laid up with who I was going to interview. And I conducted a series of interviews before we even put the first recording together officially. So it's about 4 months, probably, I'd say.
Okay. Did it seem like a long time, that 4 months?
It did, but then as we got into the season, it flew by, because having all of those interviews ready and prepared to go, I mean, we just started cranking them out once a week. So it went a lot faster once we started with our first publication or posting.
Yeah, I find, like a lot of things, the live process of putting something together seems long and gruesome, but then once it's off the ground, you look back like, oh, that went kind of quick.
That was fast. I'm like, oh my gosh, we have to do season 2 already? Holy cow.
Yeah, I can tell you 4 months is not long. It's probably on the lower end of putting a program together. When I just thinking back to any programs that I've launched, I'd say 3 to 4 months minimal just to get it conceptualized. Last minute here. I'd love to get your input on ROI. It doesn't have to be an amazing response, but in your mind, how do you justify and measure and prove the return on investment for the podcast strategy?
So I know there's a lot of great information out there on this, and we could probably talk about this a lot on another panel, but there are certainly qualitative analytics out there that point to an ROI, but I'm primarily focused on qualitative right now. And what that ROI looks like for me is if this provides me an opportunity to talk to somebody and learn about their business, and get some insights that I would not normally have had, or not necessarily have had access to, or this perhaps opens a door for me to meet somebody new. That's my ROI right now. I
love that. I don't think I could have said that better myself. I really like where you're coming from on that. And we are going to talk more about ROI starting in about 10 minutes.
Okay.
When we begin our panel discussion. But Jennifer Ayres, everybody, from Concinity, producer and host of the new Survive and Thrive podcast. Jennifer, thank you for talking with us.
Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it.
All right, we're going to let Jennifer go. Hang tight backstage. And now we're going to bring up Sheri. There she is.
Hello.
Sheri, welcome back.
Thank you. It is so good to be back, Ryan.
Thank you. Yes, Sheri and I have a little history. We've done some co-hosting together on a previous program called the White Collar Therapy and Leadership Show, which ran for about 9 months from the fall of 2018 into sometime in 2019, right before the pandemic, really.
Yep.
Yeah. And Sheri did a couple seasons with us. And now we are here to talk about Global Employee Health and Fitness Day. I'm going to bring up the website while you're talking, but why don't I let you take the stage? We have 10 minutes and the floor is yours.
So this is, and it's so funny, Jennifer, that you mentioned about the changes that have happened in relation to COVID for organizations. And this year, 2021, with Global Health and Wellness Month for employees, is really more important than it ever has been, because we've always looked at healthcare cost. Whenever I work with a company on their wellness program, we've always looked at productivity, and I've got a couple stats for all of you stat geeks out there like I am. But employee retention and employee attracting employees has become much more talked about. It's much more in the forefront. A couple of weeks ago, I was talking with some business owners and a couple of business coaches, and they were saying how difficult it is right now hiring people in because of economy going, oh, well, I'm going to make as much sitting at home as I would go to work. How are we going to attract new people to come in? And how are we going to keep the people that we have from bouncing around? So one of the things that came up in that conversation was workplace wellness culture. And I said, this is Global Health and Wellness Month. Let's talk about this. And there's so many ways that you can do that. I'm just going to give you a few tips today, but first, really digging into the why. The healthcare cost is one. So if you're listening and saying, should I be considering some type of wellness initiative, wellness program in my workplace? Healthcare cost and decrease of that is one biggie. Another one is employee productivity. And there's tons of research now on this. When I started back in this industry, I'm not going to say how many years ago, it's been over 30 years though, that there was some research, but now it is crystal clear that employees are more engaged. Quality and quantity of work both go up whenever you are engaging in wellness culture in your workplace. One of the biggies, Ryan, this one came out of Bristol University. I love this study, and it's specific to exercise, that the days that employees exercise, this is not, you have to be exercising for 6 months before you start seeing these benefits. On the days that you exercise, you have a 21% increase in your concentration and a 22% increase in your ability to meet deadlines. So when an employer says, can I afford to do something around wellness? Yes, you can, because people are going to be meeting deadlines 22% faster. So before I go into the hows, any thoughts on those things?
I'm reminded of a company I worked for within the last decade, very hip, kind of like, embracing the modern employee workplace. And so there's no cubicles or offices. And the policy was really lenient. We had foosball, we had ping pong. And usually alcohol would start around 11 a.m.
Oh,
And that was part of the culture. But we were an incredibly hardworking bunch of people. So I know that doesn't kind of coincide with what we would think of as health and wellness, but
yeah, the foosball part does.
I'm thinking about the fact that the company just was like, hey, like, we just want you to enjoy being here and be productive. And we were a hardworking group. So I don't challenge those numbers.
Yeah.
Now how you get that exercise and whatnot is
right.
The story. So yeah, let's go. Well,
and you mentioned the alcohol. That's going to tie in with my first tip, actually, because I've never heard that one before, Ryan. That in one of the pieces of a wellness culture, foundational to look at is what is in the break room, what is in the vending machines. And as a general rule, you want to start, eventually get even better than this, but start with 80-20. 80% of what is offered and being there, being a healthy option, and then 20% not being. Because when employees are taking a break and they're grabbing something, they're grabbing convenience. And if grabbing an apple or a banana or nuts or dried fruit is just as easy as grabbing a candy bar, sometimes they will gravitate toward what's healthy, and that's going to keep their energy up through the afternoon instead of crashing. Oh, awesome, Rob. Thanks for the comment. So the other piece that you want to look at and bake into your culture is movement. Simple way to do that is walking meetings. Anytime that you are, even if you're working remotely, if you don't have to be tied to a Zoom call with a PowerPoint, and you can walk and talk, grab a phone, or if you're in person, certainly walk and talk and have those brainstorming meetings. And third is what I call edutainment, where you're educating and entertaining at the same time. That's your lunch and learns. That's your emails, your education pieces that go out on video. And this one, I've got a funny story on this. Well, it's funny / sad. One of the companies I work with, they gave one of the options for their employees was to opt in to some video trainings that I would put out every week. Fun stuff, short, simple videos. Here's what happened. One of the employees landed in the ER, and the doctor looked at him and said, There's nothing wrong with your heart. There's nothing wrong with any part of the vasculars. You're fine. Your problem is, this was in 2020 during the pandemic. Your problem is you get up from your bed, go to your desk, go from your desk back to your bed. You don't move. You simply need to move. The owner called me, Ryan, so frustrated because, Sheri, you just did a training on how to move when you're working from home and how to put that into your workday. I can't believe that he's had this happen. I said, well, he didn't opt into the videos and the email. So the big joke at that point was the last person who didn't opt into my emails landed in the ER. But that's, I haven't put that out. Yes, exactly. I haven't used that on social media yet, but they did give me permission. So that's the big takeaway, is get your people moving, bake it into your culture. There are ways to do that. Edutain, get some lunch and learn, something going on that, and 80-20 rule on the break room stuff. If you're already doing those types of things, yes, you can go deeper on workplace wellness, but those are some great places to start. And last thought, Ryan, is for those of you listening who are saying, yeah, we want to do some of this, but I need it as a leader, because for you to show up as a leader in your organization, you've got to lead by example, but you've also got to be taking care of you so that you're making good decisions. We know mental clarity, decision-making is impacted by how you take care of yourself. I do have a free workshop coming up that later on, if you want me to share, I will share about that. But it's an online workshop that people can come and learn how to make it part of their personal life. That's all I've got for us today.
Please do share that. If you can put a link in the YouTube comments
I can, actually, I was trying to get to the YouTube comments a minute ago and I couldn't, but I'll put it in our chat. And if you can post it up there.
Yep, that works too.
That would be great. I will do that.
That works too. And so, folks, I invited Sheri to come up here again for a short segment on health and wellness. And this is something I've been, well, Sheri, you probably recall, I've been trying to nudge you to do this for a couple of years. I do a tech show every week. I do this show now every month, and it's all tech. It's all business. It's all serious, But what I have learned the hard way is that if you don't take care of yourself, you're going to pay for it. And it will catch up to you.
Yes.
And you have to develop some really good habits. And I'm committed to really helping people understand how important that is. I think we all do understand, but it's like you said, now in the COVID economy, when most of us are working remote, we may not have the pressure, the accountability to do things. I know yesterday I was in a meeting with one of my employees, and I could just sense my frustration escalating. I was getting hungry. I hadn't taken a break for the day. I hadn't been out to exercise. I normally do by that time in the day. And I was literally like feeling this rage coming on. And I'm just like, I have to get off this call and go clear my head, because it just piles up. And
I'm glad you recognized that and took that moment to do that.
Yeah. And the caveat to all this is the more you do focus on caring for yourself, the more sensitive you find of being in tune when you do need to take a step back, get that exercise, get that movement in. You become more sensitive to it. You kind of have these new built-in filters or alarms of, hey, you got yourself to focus on here too. So
yes. And you were talking about the frustration, then you as a leader, you snap less, you stay more consistent, and that's what people need.
Yeah, I do need that. I agree. Well, Sheri, thank you so much. And I look forward to having you back hopefully next month with another segment. So Sheri Traxler, everybody, from Vireo Life. And what we're going to do is take a quick break. 1 second here. Boom, 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 boom. We're going to bring up Lance, and we're going to bring up Jeremiah, and we're going to bring Jennifer back on the stage. And before I get started, let me just do a quick subtle orientation here for everybody. Boom, boom, boom. All right. And for those that are on the live stream, thank you again for being here. This is the B2B Hour on AutoConversion. This is a new webcast series that we launched in March. We're doing this once a month, pretty much on Wednesdays at noon for an hour. And it features interviews, discussion panels, and as you saw, health and wellness. segments. And the whole purpose here is to learn and to network and to grow together. But we also have some other agendas too. We're actually in the process of making content for ourselves. Everybody you see here today is committed to being here because we're able to make content for each other, a certain type of content. I call it conversationally driven content. And you can benefit from all this too. If you head over to autoconversion.net, what you want to do is look for the Grow menu. And under there, you'll see B2B marketing. And when you go there, you'll see we have 2 free discussion groups for B2B marketing and sales professionals, B2B marketing pros and audio video pros. And I'm going to also say, I'm looking forward to probably this time next month, we will have a 3rd discussion group within the mix as well. That is for blockchain and cryptocurrency enthusiasts as well. So that's to come. But what you can do is you can sign up for either or both of these. That will tag you in our system so that we can notify you when we're going to have another discussion group like today, so that you have a chance to be part of that. And the other thing you'll want to do is under the community menu is you'll want to go to our private unlisted LinkedIn group called AutoConversion Programming for Influencers. This is actually where we post announcements about upcoming discussion groups, prompting you and giving you a chance to be an influencer. And being an influencer means that you're up here influencing the programming. For what? Well, so you have content for your business. That is what we are doing here. All right, my panelists, are we ready to get started? Jeremiah, welcome back to the B2B Hour. What's going on?
Thank you. This is my second podcast today. I did one from 10:30 to 11:30, so I'm just staying in the seat and going.
Right, just get on the train, right?
Exactly.
I think I talked to someone the other day. I don't remember who it was, but they had done, and it might have been Rob telling me this, that someone had done like 400 podcast, like guest appearances in a year. Oh, that was you, Lance. That was you, Tom. John Lee Dumas.
Not surprised.
A couple months for his book launch.
Yeah.
Now, did he have a PR person that lined all that up? Do you know?
Yeah, he definitely had some help setting it up and organizing the format and template, but he executed back to back. And fortunately, I feel like I had a good interview going, so I got a few extra minutes, and he made it an extra episode, which ties into the theme today, right? Really deliver a lot of value, and his show gets 1.4 million downloads a month, so he made it, bonus episode.
Do you know how long he's been doing that show?
Yeah, for 8 or 9 years now.
Okay. If you had said like 2 or 3, I would have been no way.
I was like, wow, we got some work to do.
No, when you hear about people who have broke through at that level, they've been at it for a good, 5 to 10 years sometimes, for sure. I always remember that when a new band comes out, right, or a new musical artist, and it's like they break through and they become famous or popular all of a sudden, and you think they're new, but when you study them, you find out they've been at it for a good decade usually to get there. Okay, so here, let me provide some context for those that are tuned in. So we talked with Jennifer. She launched Survive and Thrive podcast. Just finished season 1 that started in January, so about 5 months for your first season. Now, Jeremiah, you launched the Entrepreneurial Web Radio. When did you launch that?
September of 2019.
2019. So you're going on almost 2 years.
Almost 2 years. Yeah.
Okay. And it is a podcast because I'm subscribed to that. How do you do your recording sessions? Are they a live stream like this?
Yeah, it's actually a live radio show through talkradio.nyc. We did everything in studio live prior to the shutdown. The studio was right next to Madison Square Garden, so it was great. You were in Midtown Manhattan. Guests would come in. I'd sit across the table from them. We did live audio through the internet broadcast, through the website, and then live video through Facebook. So you had both mediums at the end of the day, and then everything bumps to all the major podcast platforms and a few other offbeat ones, and then I would post the video to YouTube the following week and promote that as well. So it's really just shooting out all over the place in terms of the full show.
And what the shooting out aspects that you're doing now, have you have those evolved over time, or have you been doing that from day one?
We did it right from jump. I mean, I was fortunate to come into an actual, studio, and they were fully operational and had their systems in place. So the first 2 shows, we didn't do live video. He didn't realize how charismatic I was. He was like, let's give you a couple shows without the video. He didn't know I didn't care. Like, this is going to be this, I'm not stage fright. So, the first 2 were audio only, but still, we're still distributed to all the major podcast platforms. And then we added the video, and it's grown. We've added things. We've been invited to, in the beta phases of a couple new platforms. So different opportunities have come down the pipe, and we folded those in over time. But the core ones like Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Stitcher, YouTube, Red Circle, all that has been in effect since day one.
Okay. All right, great. So you're coming from a place of been there, done that, doing it, and still doing it, and Jennifer now as well. Whereas I know, say, Sheri and yourself, Lance, you're kind of you're at a stage of, hey, maybe I need to get a podcast strategy, and you're kind of in that planning stage. Lance, just for context, why don't you fill us in where you're at with your, just what I call your media strategy? Media meaning, live streaming, video, podcasting. Where are you at with yours?
Sure. So I have most recently used John Lee Dumas's, who we were just speaking about, his approach with his new book, and using chapter 7 is content production plan. So I just updated my content production plan, and I am very focused on strategy and marketing. So I had a business plan, but I wasn't as specific as I needed to be with sort of digital marketing and all the socials. So, I beefed that up, and unfortunately at the same time, I actually lost a little bit of help, but I'm pleased that I've kind of got a few new resources on my team. Even, today started working with Hannah Hernandez, who you met last week in the Clubhouse room.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, now just really trying to get the message out and execute a little bit.
And I think you're pursuing a series of interviews or panel discussions right now as well, correct?
Yeah, so definitely want to be strategic and be a guest on, minimally 2 podcasts a month, and also going to stretch a little bit and try to do 2 live stream interviews a month. I when I interviewed John Lee Dumas, I kept StreamYard, and that was very user friendly because, similar to Jennifer, I'm not extremely techy. So even using StreamYard with you right now, this is very, very easy. So I am going to try to also do 2 interviews a month as well. And I'm going to try to do them live stream, because I do feel like, again, I know, and just speaking to this panel and to the community here, like putting this together, as you've alluded to, is a tremendous amount of resources, and connecting all the dots to return on investment. It's important to add up your time and just make sure it makes sense.
Do you keep track of the time that you're putting into all this?
So I am trying to practice what I preach with Denali Consulting, my current focus and my new company, and do that in a more developed way, so I can actually take it down to profitability, add in hours and all the hard costs of any action, and then go ahead and list revenue as it comes, and decide ahead of time how long I'm going to measure that revenue, so I can actually get it to a profit number, and then compare being an interview on a podcast versus hosting a podcast versus having a Clubhouse room. All of these actions, as personally, but sharing it with the community here, I really believe in measuring so that you can have apples to apples comparisons on what actions make the most sense, because you will not have enough resources to do all the actions you want to do. So you're going to have to measure and figure out what really is the most important. So if you run out of time and resources, you've done the most important things.
So let me bring everybody back on. I wanted to kind of get that from you on the spotlight there. But Jeremiah, just based on what Lance said, right? Like keeping track of the different types of media you're producing and the time. How do you measure and or justify the ROI of your media, and specifically your media initiatives?
So it's kind of a loaded question, and I think it depends on what your goal is with each each piece of content or media that you're putting out. If you're looking just for awareness, I think Jennifer was talking about that, and just like creating connection, you're going to gauge that through some of the analytics that are available. You can see how many people liked it, how many people shared, people sending you direct messages, people commenting. Those are good ways for that. But then, as you get kind of deeper down the funnel, putting calls to action in, and seeing what the engagement is on that, and if it actually shows up for you. I mean, it just depends on what your goal is. Like for me, my podcast, I've always thought about it from day one as some sort of a lead generator for all the different things I have my hands in. So if I'm just thinking about that, generally, I'm just looking at how many views I'm getting, and really looking at just the basic analytics. But if I want something specific, if I want to create a buzz around a specific thing that I'm involved in, then I'll put out, direct kind of call to action, whether I ask people to engage or ask a question, or highlight an event that's going on, and then try to follow up and see where is the awareness for that coming from, either through more questions through social media, through the social media promotion that I put up on it, or actually if it's like a live event or something like that where people are in person, asking them how many people became aware of it through what medium, and kind of gauge what's working and what's not.
So it sounds like you really focus on the engagement aspect, specifically asking people, whether it's on the phone, through social media. That's really your main pulse is just individual responses, looking for patterns and trends.
If it's just awareness building, yes. I mean, take for instance, if I created a piece of video content for my restaurant. This was prior to everything shutting down, but not long before. Just made it myself with my daughter on an iPhone with some decent software, some decent app, and did a paid run on social, but there was a call to action to it that led to our reservation widget. So with that, I was able to see how many people actually clicked on it. I wasn't able to see, I probably could have dug a little deeper and figured out how many people actually booked through the ad. So if I'm going that route, then I'm going to get really specific and go deeper down the analytical rabbit hole to try to figure out. But if it's just awareness building, yes, I'm looking at comments, I'm looking at engagement, I'm looking at views. If I put no money into it, if it's not a paid piece of promotion, then I often don't look much deeper than the surface level. Again, and then using specific calls to actions, asking specific questions. That's a great way to really see how you're engaging with your audience and how interested they are in what you're doing, which to me turns up as ROI.
So let me try to just maybe get a more fluid conversation here with everybody, because I'm a little distracted here. But Jennifer, I mean, feel free to chime in here, because now you're in that same boat, and we did start on the subject during your interview. So just in response to Jeremiah, what's going through your mind as far as what are your indicators for ROI?
Yeah, that's great. Actually, I was thinking I'm going to reach out to Jeremiah after this, because two things just to respond to that. And I want to make a brief shout out to Sheri as well with regards to the the health topic a moment ago. So I'm going to come back to that.
Great.
But I think my experience, at least starting with the podcast, is in the beginning, you're taking a lot of time to think about what the heck am I even going to talk about? So, and that's for me why it took a year and ultimately, 4+ months of actual tactical planning before we actually were able to publish anything. Now I'm moving into this stage of, I figured out what to talk about. I figure out what's interesting and what might be of interest to folks. Now I want to start getting under the hood and looking at some of the analytics. And we do have some analytics that we're capturing. And so that's, I think, really informative. I need to explore how to derive greater insights from those and then use more of these opportunities to create a call to action and have a more intimate engagement with with folks that are interested in the subject matter and perhaps the offerings that Concinity can bring. So I feel like there's perhaps an evolution, and I'd be curious. Maybe I'll punt this question back to Jeremiah on sort of if you've made an observation over the years that there are sort of stages that you work through as you mature your podcast. But before you answer that question, just a shout out to Sheri. I love what you're doing. I love this work that you are focused on. We actually just did a whole mindfulness month for the month of May with one of our clients, Advisor 360. You can look them up. And we did a bunch of things with them, and we co-created with A360 and Sea Health to put together moments of mindfulness, like breath work, movement moments, nutrition tips, and things like that. So I totally agree with you. Anyway, excellent. Wanted to get that plug in there. So Jeremiah, just interested to get your thoughts on, did you sort of know in advance what that evolution should look like, or did you sort of discover it along the way, and maybe say a little bit about that?
Yeah, no, absolutely not. I was literally invited. I was a guest on another show on the network that I'm on. And at the end of the show, the production manager said, "Hey, you want to do your own show?" And I was like, "Yeah, sure. How soon can I start?" We literally just came in, and for the first, because I'm in New York City, I'm surrounded by talent, and I've got a lot of friends that are business owners and entrepreneurs and very charismatic people as well. And it was just like, yeah, no, let's just go. So at first it was just completely ad hoc. I'm a lifelong musician. I have music degrees, so performance was not an issue for me. And we just went. And yes, you definitely morph over time. The shutdown really pushed the show in a new direction, where before I required my guests to come in person. I would never do anything virtually. Mm-hmm. I really wanted that intimacy. I did not, unlike yourself, I did not consume any podcasts before starting my own. I'd seen Joe Rogan a couple times. So that was just what I had in my head. And I was kind of like, okay, this is how we're going to do that. COVID forced us to do a whole different thing. And it was great. So there was that whole period from like March of last year through, I'd say maybe the fall, where I was just scrambling again, like, oh my God, we're in this new morph, we're in this new phase. I felt like I was in a washing machine, just getting run through. And then I really started it got deeper, and I started to collaborate with people. So then I ended up in like a podcast community and got great suggestions. And then, I was kind of reminded why I started it in the first place. And again, it was to kind of like be a lead generator at various different levels, again, top of the funnel, bottom of the funnel, middle of the funnel, all these different places. So I had to kind of go back to that again. And that was exciting. So now that's kind of where I'm at, is being more specific about how the shows run, the questions that I ask, not so much the guests that I bring on, because I'm pretty open to a wide range of guests, but definitely like how I like to steer the show. But then every now and then still, like Lance and I did our second show together last Friday, and we just kind of had fun, and it was just kind of wild, and that's okay too. So I wouldn't overthink each one. They don't all have to be like walk-off home runs. You should enjoy what you're doing. And if you don't, if there's this moment where you're like, this is taxing, like you have a job already, this should be fun, and it's going to come across to people as more exciting when they feel and see that, as opposed to like, this is something rigorous I have to do. And I don't get too heavy into the overproduction value, not at this stage. And I'm almost 2 years in. I think that comes a little later on down the road.
Great. Thanks.
I had tuned into a live stream the other day, and it was two co-hosts, and I actually knew them. And the one of them just didn't seem like he wanted to be there. And the words coming out of his mouth didn't match his body language at all. And like the words coming out were like, I'm happy and excited to be doing blah, 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 blah. But it was kind of like,
yeah, right.
Not, and that's one of the consequences, the unintended consequences when you have a media strategy. I was telling a friend of mine, I think just yesterday, I haven't published a podcast episode for one of my podcasts in over 2 months. It's driving me nuts. I'm like, it's the last thing on the chain, and I just haven't done it. And I thought, if there were like tens or hundreds of thousands of people, let alone millions, that were counting on that podcast every week, can you imagine the pressure that you must feel that like you gotta deliver? And I don't think we think about that. I do think a lot of us look at what we're doing here with live streaming and podcasting. I think on the surface, a lot of us think we have to get all these, masses of people to follow us. I don't think that's true at all. In fact, I don't even know if I want.
I agree.
I mean, certainly you can't refuse people, to keep up with you, but you agree, Jennifer. Sheri, let me hear you chime in. What are your thoughts on the motivations for having a media strategy?
For me personally, a lot of it's like Jeremiah talked about, and that's leads. And also it's qualifying those leads. Because when I have people come to me who haven't seen because I have a YouTube channel, not a podcast at this point. I do a lot of podcast guesting, but I don't have a podcast. When people have seen the YouTube videos, they have been following me on social media platforms, they come knowing what I'm about and it's a better fit. When they've only seen one of those platforms or just been, heard about me somewhere, sometimes it's not a good fit. And we go through this whole, call and figuring out how we're going to work together and then realize this isn't going to work anyway. So that's my biggest is the motive. It's that, well, the motivation from a business standpoint is that. The motivation from why I do what I do, period, is whether it's here, having somebody now be inspired to go do something in their company or in their personal life to be healthy, that's a win, because that's why I do what I do.
I'll second that. For me, I guess for me, like the live shows is a great way to really filter people in and out that you want to, you're getting to know people, right? You're getting to know each other in a public setting. To me, I get a real immediate sense of, I want to continue dialoguing with, this person, that person, and others. You're like, well, maybe you don't need to, it filters them out. So,
okay. So that's a good sign that we were co-hosts for a couple of seasons and you've brought me back in for this. So good. I'm glad to know I haven't been filtered out.
Well, hey, just the fact that you're a co-host says a lot.
It's a good point, though, because that you raise, Ryan. One of the podcasts that Queued Up Podcasting does their own podcast on podcasting, and they do a lot of statistics and share a lot of insights. But one of the things that they said in one of their episodes was that a client that they had was talking about measuring the ROI and didn't have a lot of followers, but ended up winning a contract that was like hundreds of thousands of dollars. So, it's like, again, that sort of qualitative, quantitative metric, I think, is what you need to be thinking about when you think about ROI.
I was going to say also, you mentioned, Ryan, like getting a bunch of viewers and having like tens of thousands of people. Like that's one way, is pointed out to me. Like, sure, if that's the route you want to go, you're probably looking to generate ad revenue. And it's a little bit easier to gauge the ROI on that. It's a lot harder to pull off because you have to get all those followers. And then you have, what you were talking about, Jennifer. And I think the ideal scenario would be to have a little bit of both, but the amount of people listening really is not that qualifying.
Well, that's why I'm a big advocate for what I call that post-production process. To me, I'm looking at, I call these recording sessions, and I'm looking at everybody individually on how I can, I guess complement or strategically complement what you're trying to do, because it's post-producing that content. A good analogy for that, I think, is I always go back to either making an album. So going back to, I'm a rocker, so a rock band. Back in the day, when you were in a band, you made your living through tours, through performing live, right? Then album sales came in, and that became part of it. And well, now I don't think you can make money off of record sales or music sales. You have to go on tour to really build an audience. But the point is, you have artists who spend months or years making a song or an album, and they perform it live, and maybe tens of thousands of people might be there to see that, maybe just a few hundred. Right. But you're going to get to know that song over and over and over again by what? Listening to it on the radio, listening because you own the album. It's not the live event that has a stickiness. It's the actual content itself. And I use the analogy of shelf life. Right. So a news item, a headline has a very instantaneous shelf life, right? Maybe in today's culture, it's like 30 minutes, but give it a couple of days. Whereas business content, unlike a movie or an album, which is ideally going to last through the ages, right? Business content has a shelf life. I know what that shelf life, at least I think I know what that shelf life is. Anybody have an opinion on what the shelf life of this type of content would be? You ever hear the term evergreen? Right? Creating evergreen content. I don't know the definition of evergreen, but it implies that it's relevant for a long period of time. So I would argue that the shelf life of business grade content like this is about 12 to 18 months. What we're talking about today, if we come back 2 years from now, it'll still be relevant 2 years from now, but maybe 5 years from now, it might not be. So much will have changed.
That's Ryan. That's what was going through my mind. Was initially I thought, well, this is business, so it's forever. Well, a business principle is forever, but tactical things on podcasting and ROI of podcasting 20 years from now, podcast may be obsolete. There's going to be something else.
Yeah.
If we hit another pandemic, everything changes again.
Yeah.
In 3 years, kids are going to look back at this show and go, "Oh, they're so cute."
Oh, wow, they weren't on a hologram.
Right. Beam me up, Scotty.
They say that now. But like TikTok, I mean, what's the shelf life of that? It's like a day, right? If you don't get 1 million views in a day, you're not gonna, that's the nature of that.
Ryan, regarding podcasting, I mean, I was in a Clubhouse room recently and they were kind of using top of mind information that podcasts, they really actually spoke as if podcasts were meaningless. And it surprised me. And again, that made me want to know the data, and I'll have to look into the data a little bit better. But I just looked online, even based on some of this conversation, and a 2018 article said there was a 50% pod fade, meaning 50% failure rate of podcasts. And, that's why I do think some of the principles that'll be longer lasting is, having a working theory on how much we expect, what our goal is, of course, whether it's going to be more branding, which, by the way, most small businesses can't afford branding. Even the wealthiest companies in the world, like the pharmaceutical companies, don't do brand marketing anymore. They're very strategic. They don't throw paint on the wall. So, I really believe in profit first and trying to, Michael Michalowicz, making sure that they're, small businesses survive and you're cash flow positive and you actually are trying to get to profit. So, even the title of my book and Michael Gerber's stat, which I know, Ryan, we're involved with Rob Holman, Michael Gerber's stat is that 80% of small businesses fail in the first 5 years. And by the way, don't get too happy because 80% of that 20% are going to fail in the next 5 years. And that's 96%. So I do think we have to be realistic for the small business owners out there getting started or newer in the journey, that you do need to be, in addition to just helping people, you have to make sure you're going to be able to survive and thrive, right? In Jennifer's words.
Can you clarify what you said from the Clubhouse room, that somebody said that something about podcasting was meaningless? What did they say was meaningless?
Yeah, well, they were a select group, 1,000 people. It was actually a Bitcoin room, basically downplaying the significance of podcasts. And I was like, well, I'm pretty sure podcasts didn't go to zero. I know the pandemic might have changed.
Strategy? That was the context of that, as a business
Yeah,
strategy?
just like nobody's listening to podcasts anymore. Now, granted, Clubhouse did move the needle, right? It's a whole new thing. And, I don't know the data. Jeremiah might. And there's certainly an awful lot of people and growing now that it just came out to Droid last week. However, I think podcasts are still relevant. I don't think it went away overnight.
Yeah, I mean, I think my retort to that, is Clubhouse eating into the market share of potential podcast listeners? Is live streaming eating into the share of blogging or television, right? Like, I specifically use the term omni-channel because a podcast strategy is probably the hardest media strategy to have, whereas like a blog strategy is relatively easy. Just going through the motions, it's relatively easier to make a blog than it is a podcast. So I would put podcasting as probably a very difficult strategy to maintain. Consistency is the key, right? It's like I said, I haven't done an episode in 2 months and it's driving me nuts because there's no consistency there, and there's no point in having one if you're not going to be consistent. But if all you have is a podcast strategy, Well, there's a problem with that. And the problem is sometimes it's not convenient to listen to a podcast. Sometimes it's super convenient to listen to a podcast, like when you're driving, right? But there's times where it's not convenient to listen to a podcast where you actually need to read. You ever been in a situation where you can consume some information, but the only way that would be appropriate would be to be reading it, like on your phone, right? So if you don't have your podcast or have a blog strategy, then you're going to eliminate that channel from people consuming that. And obviously watching a video is extremely inconvenient for the most part. It takes up all your attention.
Mm-hmm.
I find
So why are we doing this again?
a recording session.
Yeah. I mean,
Omni-channel?
Lance's, his point there, or whatever they said in that clubhouse room, if you're gauging it only off of what's happening with the podcast, then that might be the case. But the podcast is simply, like Brian said, it's just the initial medium. It can get projected to so many different channels off of 1 hour. You could do not even an hour. 45 minutes if you do 45 minutes a week, that could turn into hundreds of pieces of content. And that's where you can really strike engagement. So you can get transcriptions and create a blog out of it, a bunch of little mini quotes, you could do 15-second video clips, 30-second video clips, 1 minute, longer form if you want, but it can become endless as far as that goes. And, then that podcast becomes much more relevant, but maybe not the show itself. So if you're looking at like the Spotify views or the YouTube views, you might be like, oh, this is kind of embarrassing, But then if you look at all the things that talking about ROI, look at all the media on all of your channels. So for my case, I'm posting about the show on LinkedIn, on Twitter, on Instagram, on Facebook, even on TikTok a little bit. If I gathered all that data surrounding all the different ways that I put it out, then all of a sudden you've got a very magnified outreach and data coming from multiple sources. And speaking of strategy, I'm working with a number of people right now to magnify that exponentially more. I mean, it's a great way to take 45 minutes to 1 hour of your week and just yank that lever hard like the slot machine, and you hope you hit the winning number and all the change falls out. But usually you get something, right? And I think that's the way that podcast should be utilized, unless you're John Lee Dumas.
No, that's great. So two points jump out to me. Yeah, so that's repurposing. I think we want to really emphasize that. And then connecting to what we've been saying, just like the accurate way to measure that would be to make sure we're capturing, because you're repurposing that for all those different mediums. So really making sure you're capturing all those, revenue streams, leads, all the correct indicators.
Every place that you publish a piece of content offers some sort of analytics or metrics to go by, and they're all different. I've actually taken the time to create a spreadsheet and try to get all the analytics from all, Facebook, LinkedIn, YouTube, and put on one. But the problem is they all measure different things different ways. So you can't actually get an apples to apples comparison. So
totally.
You really do have to look at the metrics of everywhere you're publishing and make an assessment there. And Jen, this is like we were talking about your website analytics. So, Jeremiah, when I asked you the question about measuring ROI, you said it's a loaded question. It kind of is, because, depending on how you implement your strategy is going to determine what kind of metrics that you have to go by. I would say, here's my 2 cents on the matter. As long as you see things going up, think of a stock market, right? Of a ticker. As long as you see things going up, you're winning. That's what's key. It doesn't matter how much. It just matters that it does. You're still going to go down once in a while. You're going to have days and weeks where your numbers go down. But if every month you're getting a little bit higher and higher, I think that's all you really need to know, is that you're winning.
Ryan, as you being a marketing expert regarding, making apples to apples comparisons, I think that's an opportunity right here. If you can solve that for the business owners in this call and the world.
Yeah. And it's really difficult because with podcasts, all you get are the number of downloads. And you can get regional information depending on who your podcast host is. Like you could get regional information, but you don't get demographic information off a podcast. You just get number of downloads, right? So you can't really understand the podcast audience the way that you might be able to understand, say, your YouTube audience or your blog subscribers. And some people are going to listen to only one channel or consume only one channel, whereas some people might bounce between 2 or 3. And so that's another thing. How many people are consuming multiple channels? Do you add them? You know, it's a tricky one.
Lance, quick question. You mentioned pod fade whenever they mention that in the Clubhouse. If I'm hearing that right, they're referring to the number of podcasts that launch and then stop producing.
Correct. Yeah, that's just a term in the podcasting industry.
Yeah, and so for me, that's not and this is just me personally, that's not a reflection of whether podcasts are trending and more people listening to podcasts and the quality of people listening to podcasts. That's more of I produced 15 podcasts and got tired of it, or didn't produce what I wanted and I quit.
Totally.
So it's like I guess I'm saying if they're saying podcasts are obsolete because people aren't doing it, it's dropping off. Yeah, I would have to disagree with them.
A lot of times people say they're coming from a personal place,
yeah,
right?
They need to go
I stopped listening to podcasts where everybody else has.
Go do the research. And I just sent a link, by the way, to the Queued Up Podcasting on this chat where people can go and get some stats. So they do, John Luckenbach does a series with Jace Soderbergh, who's perhaps one of the Mac Daddies of podcasting, I guess you could say. Pod Vader is his nickname. But they do a whole couple of these. They dig into the analytics and what's happening, where's growth, and then they interrogate sort of the source of these stats around podcasting. And I don't think it's going away anytime soon. So,
no, definitely not. And
I would agree with that. The one point I would say is I think it's, for those of you who know Chandler Bolt, like when you write a book, he recommends looking at it as an individual business. So for me, whether you look at your podcast as an individual business, I still think it should have profit and loss, which is kind of, just know your numbers, right? Which is a theme of today, and look at it. Unless it's going to be a loss leader, it has to make sense in some way. So that's sort of my point. There's a high failure rate.
Agree. You gotta
podcast.
I think you have to do that for any strategy you employ in business. So
absolutely agreed, 1,000%.
Yeah.
That's probably a great takeaway. Is it's not so much how much money you're making from your podcast. Is it meeting your objectives that you've set out, which if you didn't set out objectives, you wouldn't know. You just have to have those defined, because it serves many, many different purposes for sure. Well, hey, this is the kind of stuff we will always be talking about up here. So that's the purpose of this. So we're going to go ahead and wrap up, but and I'll let you guys go. But hey, thank you for being here and making this a great conversation, you guys.
Thank you
so much.
Thanks
a lot. Okay. Nice meeting everybody.
Bye, everybody.
See you folks again. Take care.
All right. So again, that was Sheri Traxler from Vireo Life, Jeremiah Fox with Entrepreneurial Web Radio. There was Jen Ayres at Consinity. She just started her first podcast, Survive and Thrive. And then there was Lance Knab, who you're going to see a lot more of here on AutoConversion, because Lance and I got some neat stuff going on these days. So I'm going to bring up my website and we'll wrap this up, but head on over to autoconversion.net. And like I said, if you go into the grow menu, because we're here to help you grow your professional brand, your network, we have a lot of resources to help you do that. We have this B2B marketing mastermind group, which consists of B2B marketing pros and audio video pros. These are free discussion groups that we offer. You can sign up and get yourself registered, and then you'll start receiving invites to participate in these programs as well, to do all the things we're talking about: analyze conversations, put together media strategies, post-produce and merchandise content for your marketing strategy, and then understanding how it impacts and benefits your business as well. So thank you to everyone that was here. And thank you, Rob. I saw you on the live chat with some of your great comments. So thank you, Rob. And anyone else that tuned in live. And if you're hearing the recording, feel free to say hello as well. I'm going to go ahead and sign off. I am Ryan. We'll be back here next month. So make sure you subscribe to our YouTube channel and reach out to me if I can be of assistance in any way. Have a great rest of the day and a great rest of the week, everybody. Take care.